Trillions could flow through cryptos like Stellar XLM, and Zion coins could benefit. Welcome back to part 2 of this docu-series, Banking on Bitcoin, Revisited, a re-education. Now, as you can see, Nick there was trying to set up an exchange for Bitcoin in New York, no doubt. And really, this is a big issue because there's no regulation, right? Well, this is still the same issue we have right now. How are we going to resolve this issue? What is happening right now? We need to look at that. How are these problems going to be resolved? And is the regulators working with cryptos? Who's at the helms? Nathan, banking on Bitcoin. Okay guys, so it's about time I introduced you to Jed McCaleb. That was Jed then, back in around 2009, 2010. And really, to get a picture of what Jed's done up until this day, we need to check out an article from this year from Forbes. So Nathan, Forbes article on Jed. Who is he? What has he done? But first, what's this?
As mentioned earlier, OpenCoin is now known as Ripple. The company was co-founded in 2012 by Chris Larsen and Jed McCaleb. Chris Larsen was the CEO of eLoan, an online mortgage lender, and Jed McCaleb was the creator of Donkey, a peer-to-peer file sharing network, and MT-Gox, a Bitcoin exchange. Together, they created Ripple, formerly OpenCoin, as a decentralized payment system that was designed to facilitate fast and secure global financial transactions. The company has since grown into a major player in the financial technology space, with its blockchain-based payment platform being used by over 300 banks and other financial institutions worldwide.
What program am I using right here, right now? What software is this? We'll discuss that later, and who's involved in it.
Jed McCaleb, one of the co-founders of Ripple, left the company in 2013. According to public statements released by Ripple, Jed McCaleb's departure was due to strategic differences with the other members of the Ripple team. Specifically, McCaleb wanted to focus more on developing Ripple's technology for consumer payments, while the rest of the team wanted to focus on selling their technology to banks and other financial institutions. After leaving Ripple, McCaleb went on to found Stellar, another blockchain-based payment platform that is similar to Ripple in many ways. Stellar, like Ripple, allows for fast, secure, and low-cost global payment transactions. However, Stellar is focused more on helping people in developing countries and other underserved communities gain access to financial services, while Ripple is focused mainly on serving large financial institutions. Overall, the departure of Jed McCaleb from Ripple marked a significant shift in the company's strategy and direction, and helped pave the way for the development of a new blockchain-based payment platform that would go on to have a significant impact in the world of finance and technology.
And we will be discussing how Stellar is doing with its mission later, how Ripple is doing with its mission later, because there is a lot to discuss. Okay, let's find out a little bit more about Jed and what he's doing now. And I believe this Forbes article is fairly accurate by John Power. Crypto billionaire Ripple founder Jed McCaleb's non-profit lent money to Genesis. Now what's going on here? The Stellar Development Foundation, a non-profit organization created by Jed McCaleb in 2014, is owed $13.2 million by Genesis, the bankrupt crypto lending firm. And really, Jed has many roles. The CEO of Stellar Development Foundation is now Donnell Dixon, and Jed, I believe, is co-founder now of Astra Institution, which we'll look at a little bit later on. Crypto lending firm Genesis filed for bankruptcy in the Southern District of New York on Thursday evening, making it the latest casualty of the crypto market organization that's roiled investors since November collapse of crypto exchange FTX, now 2023. New filings revealed that Genesis owes its largest 50 creditors some $3.4 billion. One of those creditors is the Stellar Development Foundation, an organization affiliated with Stellar Blockchain and its Lumens cryptocurrency. Jed McCaleb is one of the original cryptocurrency entrepreneurs, founded Stellar in 2014. Genesis owes the Stellar Development Foundation about $13.2 million, according to the bankruptcy file. The foundation, which describes itself as a non-profit organization, is Genesis' 42nd largest creditor. A spokesman for the Stellar Development Foundation said in an email to Forbes that the organization extended a limited series of loans in 2022 to Genesis Institutional Lending Desk. The outstanding claim represents an immaterial portion of our overall treasury and does not impact our operations in any way, as we remain well funded for the present and the future, pursue our mission to create equitable access to the global financial system, the spokesman said. Sounds like Donnell Dixon, spokeswoman. The Stellar Development Foundation describes its mission as supporting the development and growth of the open source Stellar network. The Stellar counts big names, Silicon Valley investors and entrepreneurs as its advisors, including venture capitalist Keith Robius, CEO of Stripe Patrick Collusion, and OpenAI CEO Sam Altman, according to the foundation's website. And we know that Jed McCaleb is a donor for OpenAI, and OpenAI was a program I was just using, ChatGPT, and it's an API where you can connect to the system, an artificial intelligence system which does what you can see and many more. We have Dolly that creates pictures, that creates AI art. There's so much that's going on with OpenAI. It was, I believe, founded by Elon Musk, and he's taken a seat back to Tesla and left Sam to crack on with it. I read on, the Stellar Foundation's venture capital arm, the Enterprise Fund, has invested over $55 million across a dozen or so crypto payments startups. The foundation has also partnered with organizations like UN Refugee Agency, and P2P payment company MoneyGram on various initiatives. And there you go. That brings you up to date with what's happening with Stellar and Stellar's mission. McCaleb, 44, was among the first software engineers to build cryptocurrency business in 2010. He started Mt. Gox, which became the first major Bitcoin exchange. And I'll say Mt. Gox actually, yes, was hacked, and Mark Capello was the director at the time, and obviously Jed knew at that time, after he sold it to him, he was going to run it poorly, and a lot of people lost their Bitcoin and lost faith. And at that time, the market was doing very well. After that, there was a massive decline. Bull run had finished and it had declined. In 2011, McCaleb began developing the source code of a token called XRP, which joined forces with the payment startup Ripple in 2012. Within a year, McCaleb left Ripple over reported disagreements with fellow founders. He signed a separation agreement which limited the amount of XRP he could sell at once. McCaleb, who Forbes estimates is worth $2.4 billion, is one of the few crypto moguls who has retained his future amid the recent crypto crash. That's because McCaleb sold much of his crypto at the peak of the markets. McCaleb unwound around 2.5 billion worth of XRP tokens pre-tax between December 2020 and July 2022. Today, XRP trades at around 40 cents. Actually, is now trading at around 52 cents, down from 50% from last year. And I will say that Bitcoin had actually gone up to $67,000 per Bitcoin. And back in 2017, XRP had rose from less than a cent since the inception of banking on Bitcoin, all the way up to $3.5. 2018 was a massive crash. So we know that Bitcoin and cryptos, altcoins, fluctuate. They have the macro cycle, but they always go up in value. And Bitcoin today is standing at around 25,000. So you can see clearly where we are today. And I'll talk a little bit more later on in the video about what's been happening with regulation. And that's very important because it's quite prominent. That's great. Thanks for that, Nathan. So we know now that Jed has actually learned from mistakes and realized that cryptos need a decentralized exchange, and he's incorporated this into the code of Ripple and Stellar. Pretty much to date, from what I recollect, the only blockchains, cryptos with a decentralized exchange built into the ledger, built into the protocol. This is a big deal, and we're going to take a little look at what sort of operations we can get on Stellar and incorporate that into our applications, our web-facing applications. One word for you: Web3. And we're going to be looking at Ether in that context at the same time as well, and who is involved in Ether. Nathan, over to you.
Well,
interesting. Well, let me tell you what does scale. Stellar XLM does scale and can complete 1,500 transactions within 5 seconds. Within a second, 1,500 transactions instantly with 5-second finality. And that is huge for cross-border remittances. And, you know, once we've completed our Zig-free wallet, you'll be able to encrypt and store your keys on your own mobile device and retrieve them with biometrics. So you will not need an email address. You will not need an app. Just simply zigfree.io. And further to this, inflation. We are going through this right now as we speak. With the USA having the reserve dollar, the Federal Reserve are printing and have been given the green light to print even more dollars from the Treasury, from the US government, because the Senate has just rose the debt ceiling yet again to a limit unknown by Biden's order. And this is serious now, people. And if the Americans think that they have no possibility of losing the reserve currency, they're wrong. If the US government believe this, they are wrong, because the BRICS nations are now introducing their currency to the world, and this currency is backed by gold. Brazil, Russia, India, South Africa, China have grouped together to introduce a new currency that threatens the dominance of the reserve currency. And if there is no value in the dollar because it's been fleeted away by this printing, then there is trouble yet to come. It may be the safest place to be, crypto. Yes, and right now, to this day, we're still writing on blockchains like Stellar XLM, and we know that Bitcoin is the genesis, it's the beginning, the concept. We know Satoshi Nakamoto has solved the problem, the double spend problem, where you can only spend one Bitcoin once and it's recorded on that ledger and it's cryptographically protected. But what are we doing today? Well, we produce the award-winning web app Zigfree V2 on top of the Stellar network, and we're able to use all the Stellar operations, but namely our app enables true decentralization of your keys. Your keys are not stored with a central party. You keep your keys on your own mobile device encrypted, and you can retrieve these keys with biometrics. It is going to go into beta very shortly, so watch this space. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm Nathan, aka Nathan of Zion, and today I am presenting to you the flow of Zigfree V2 with biometrics. Today I'm just going to demonstrate to you what we've achieved so far with our biometrics login. Now, what this does is you can add a username, which will combine that to your secret keys. Your keys are encrypted, and as you can see, you can select from a list. Your keys are encrypted and they're stored locally, and they are retrieved with biometrics. So we're going to log in. Creating an account is straightforward. You'll have the option to store your keys. You'll have the option to write your keys down, copy them, paste them if you want, but I suggest you write them down and put them in a safe place, so you've got them. And then this feature here, this function, the back end inside the actual wallet enables you to have the set24 flow. As you can see here, we will have a number of anchors inside this list, preset anchors that you can select from. If you want to add those assets, then you'll be able to connect via their banking system. Away you go. So that's our Zigfree V2 backend. What we've done so far, where we want to go again, is we want to add the exchange feature, the OBM, order book marketplace. We want to add the automated market making and the swap, so you can utilize path payments, making markets and utilizing path payments, AMM and swap. Fund this account, right, with some test credits. By the way, this is still a laboratory, so you can use this to check and test operations, whatever your workflow is going to be. And there we do. We have some nice Stellar Lumens credits, and now we can actually create some operation using a number of these operations. We have payment, half payment, strict payment, send and receive. Now this is half payments are used for Stellar swap functionality, like the atomic swap functionality that you have. Also managed sell offers, buy and sell managed sell offers, passive offer, so that would be like a limit, offer limit. And you know, with these managed sell offers, you can have an order book. You can create your order book, buy and sell, pretty much like what you can see here on our Zigfree wallet. We're working on this OBM wallet. We're going to build out the APIs for that, and that all comes from using these operations. And there are many operations which you could have. Again, liquidity pool. You can use that liquidity pool for AMM, essentially setting up liquidity pools where you can receive a fee. And so it makes this whole thing redundant, where you have to actually, mine crypto to receive a fee. you could just be a liquidity provider. And we're so early at the moment. Being a liquidity provider is highly recommended, especially on the Stellar network. And there you have it. Thank you for joining us in this episode 2 of Banking on Bitcoin Revisited, a re-education. And we've seen how Jed McCaleb has really brought Stellar to life, looking at the current issues of having an exchange and, really being able to function those operations, or employ those operations into the Stellar blockchain itself, enabling developers to have a decentralized exchange, a decentralized way of swapping digital assets, and being able to have path payments, enabling atomic swaps, so you don't even have to visit an exchange. And this is really quite important. But what are we going to be looking at next? In the next episode of Banking on Bitcoin Revisited, we're going to be looking at regulators. Yes, Gary Gensler. Who, why, and what is going on just there, and what was happening before. Is it still happening right now? Join us in the next episode. I'm Nathan, aka Nathan of Zion. See you in the next one. Take care now.